Hello, Green Spring. I'm your host today, Avon Price, on this beautiful Wednesday morning, and I'm here with two lovely guests. I have Janelle Cesari. I hope I'm saying that right.
You are.
And then I have Board of Director Representative, Green Spring resident, Roy O'Connor. How are you doing?
Okay, good morning.
All right, so you're probably wondering what we're doing here today. You know, Roy's not here for an update about the board of directors and all that. He's actually here to help me congratulate and talk about Jackie Robinson. And if people didn't know, this is the 70th anniversary of the year he debuted in the major leagues. And during that time, if you don't remember, it was a segregated issue where blacks did not play on the same team as whites. So this was a major breakthrough back in the day when Jackie Robinson first started playing with the major leagues and everything. So we kind of divided this show up into different sections, but we're first going to talk about his early life. I'm pretty sure most people know about his baseball, which we'll touch. But let's first discuss his early life. And I know Janelle has some real interesting facts on his early life.
Thanks, Avon. Well, first of all, I wanted to say that I really was not taught about Jackie Robinson when I was growing up in school. It's something I learned about later in life. As you know, I'm an avid baseball fan, as is Mr. O'Connor. And several years ago, I noticed that they started doing, on April 15th, they started holding a Jackie Robinson Day in Major League Baseball. And on that day, they honor the memory and the contribution and the legacy of Jackie Robinson. And all the players wear number 42, which was his number, and that number was retired. So no one else can ever be number 42 in Major League Baseball.
Now let's make sure we're clear that no one in all of baseball, or just the team that he was on, wears 42.
All of baseball.
All of baseball.
All of baseball.
So no one in baseball can ever wear 42.
That's right.
That's really cool.
So this year I was watching my Nationals, and I noticed that Dusty Baker and all the Nationals were wearing it, and Dusty Baker spoke a bit about Jackie Robinson, who obviously was a big influence of his, Dusty Baker being a manager in the major leagues. So that kind of got me curious to look into his life, and I did a little bit of research myself.
All right, tell us what you found in your research.
Well, before he became a famous baseball player, he had a very humble upbringing. He was born in Cairo, Georgia in 1919 into a family of sharecroppers. And unfortunately, his father left his family when he was only 1 year old. Wow. So after his father left the family, the mother picked up the 5 children, he was one of 5, and they moved to Pasadena, California. And that experience of him moving to California exposed him to a lot of recreational activities and sports. So from a very early age, he showed a talent and an interest in many, many sports. And unfortunately, he was excluded from a lot of these recreational activities in the white neighborhoods. So from a very early age, he experienced racial discrimination. But he had a burning desire to be the best. And
do you remember the kind of other sports that he was really into? I know there was actually a handful of different sports he was really good at.
Yeah, he excelled in baseball, football, track and field, and even tennis.
Okay.
And he graduated from high school and lettered in a lot of different things. And what I found interesting too was his older brother Mac, actually participated in the 1936 Olympics in Nazi Germany. And he won a silver medal in track and field. I believe it was in the long jump.
Really?
Right. Right behind Jesse Owens.
Yes, yes.
I never knew that. That's really cool.
But sadly, when he came back, and this is a reflection of the times, when he came back after being a silver medalist, the only job he could get was a garbage man in California, driving a garbage truck because of the time.
Yeah.
So he graduated from high school, and then he went to Pasadena Junior College because they lived near Pasadena, and he played quarterback. So even though he was known for baseball, from what I read, he excelled in many things, and baseball wasn't necessarily, when he was young, his best sport. And while he was in Pasadena in college, he met his wife, Rachel, and he left college just short of graduation to be an athletic director, and his mother was very disappointed in him when he did that. She wanted him to finish. But just the fact that he went to college, we're talking 1930s, late 30s, early 40s, is significant.
It's a different time back then, because that was a very rare thing, not just for just people in general, but just a colored person to go to college.
Right.
You're about to say something, Roy?
Well, actually, I think he also, in his last 2 years, transferred to UCLA.
Yes, he did.
And he lettered in several sports, but he was a big star there.
Yes, he was. And then after college, he had a military career. And, it's interesting when you read about, this is someone, World War II started and he went into the military, but he wanted to go to officer candidate school, but his application was denied. And there was another famous person along with him who did the same thing and was also, the application was delayed.
Okay.
And that was and you'll know this person, the heavyweight boxing champ, Joe Louis.
Okay.
So they formed a friendship in the military. And Mr. O'Connor, I know that you spent some time in the military, and it's interesting when you read about what it was like being an African American person in the military in the 1940s. Do you have any comment on that?
Yes, I mean, it was segregated. The Army was segregated until World War II. It was President Truman who actually integrated the armed forces after the war. But it was completely that way. And I remember, of course, much later than Jackie Robinson, but in the 60s even, I was a young lieutenant in the Army and traveling with a master sergeant, African American. We were traveling to the south to go to Fort McClellan, Alabama. And we decided to stop for lunch. We're driving down, we're going to a course down there together. And he said, "Why don't you just bring me a sandwich out?" And I was like kind of surprised. Why? Because he knew that once you got into the South, I mean, it was really still segregated in those days. Yeah. So it went on for a long time. Yeah.
My dad, he's actually from the South, Mississippi. And so he told me stories growing up, and he was born early 60s, excuse me. And he said he remembers when him and his mom would go into town to get something to eat or go to the grocery store, especially at the restaurants. They would have to go behind, in the back way to get something to eat, and then they didn't even get really like a full menu. They just probably got 2 selections to pick from and just got kind of like the scrapes of the restaurant.
Right. And at the same time, the Army, though, was really getting very, very integrated. So that made it really difficult, They were living one life in the Army, and then if you went civilian life,
they had to switch in
like
real life.
I'm sure Jackie ran into that.
He did, and actually it's interesting because we hear a lot about Rosa Parks and, the bus.
Yeah.
And Jackie Robinson had a very critical or significant incident while he was in the military. In 1944, he was on an Army bus, and the bus driver ordered him to go to the back, and Jackie refused to go to the back of the Army bus. Well, he was court-martialed, and this court-martialing prohibited him from activities overseas, so he never saw combat. But he fought this and eventually was acquitted and was ultimately honorably discharged. But this incident showed, and other incidents along the way when he was growing up, very early on he was a fighter for civil rights. And later I'll get into that, his post-baseball legacy in civil rights. But to have the courage to do this, to fight the military, to stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
This is an amazing thing in a time when, this was socially acceptable to tell African Americans to go to the back of the bus.
Yeah. So we see a pattern going on. He grew up dealing with discrimination. He encountered it in his career life, in the military, and like you said, he had to stand up for himself and stuff. So we can see that gave him the strength that when he transitioned to baseball, he had the courage to, what's the word I'm looking for? He had the self-control.
Yes.
To make sure he did not. One that I'm thinking of, not to embarrass his mother out there.
Yeah.
Acting, acting, out of his feelings or emotions. But that's really, I never knew in school that he was in the military. In school they just give you a generic, he was the first black man to join baseball.
Yeah.
But, he had so much other accomplishments. Like I never knew he applied, for higher status in the military. I didn't know he was in the military.
Yeah.
So this is real interesting.
Well, I didn't even learn about him in school, so I think it's a good thing that you learned about him. But his whole life, the pattern with him is nonviolent protest and doing things without violence and doing things with his mind, advancing causes for baseball and business. And this is a very admirable quality. I think this is his character. In addition to his baseball skill, his legacy was his character.
Yeah.
So then we get into his playing career, and after the military, and I'll let Mr. O'Connor speak more on this, but I'll just preface it by saying that he did go into, I believe, the Negro Leagues for a while.
Yes.
But didn't really want to stay there.
Right. After he took that job as a athletic director down in Texas. That didn't last very long. Matter of fact, in 1945, he joined the Negro League. It was a whole separate league. Okay, and since 1880, it had this unwritten code, okay, that the blacks did not play in the white major league. So they had their own league, complete teams, everything. And he played with the Kansas City Monarchs, okay, in the Negro League. He batted .397 that year. He had 5 home runs. By the way, I'm not just doing this from memory. At the time, I was 9 years old, okay, 1945. But I did do a little research again to kind of refresh myself. And if I could just back up a minute, because I grew up in New York, Westchester County, about 30 miles north of New York City. You know, and at that time, growing up in school, we had 3 teams in New York City. We had the Brooklyn Dodgers, we had the New York Giants, and the New York Yankees. So many years after that, in that next 10-year period, and particularly when Jackie Robinson came in, the World Series were being played between those teams. We used to call it the Subway World Series, okay? But my memories go back to that period, 1945, 46. In 46, Branch Rickey, who was he was a part owner, actually general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, and he was a very religious man, okay, and he decided it was time to really integrate the major leagues.
Now, was there something that was it something he just randomly came up with,
well,
or?
You know, you can read different things about it, but I think that it basically was his own inner drive.
Okay.
People thought it might happen sometime, but he really wanted it to happen. And he was a businessman, too.
Okay.
And he could see the value, you know.
And if you watch interviews of Jackie Robinson later in life, Branch Rickey was a huge influence on his life. This was someone who believed in him and encouraged him. However, I'll let Mr. O'Connor go on, but I think it's very significant to say, and I don't know if we're there yet, to talk about the agreement they had. And I know he was in the minors for a while, and I did read that when he was in the minors, he was not allowed to stay in the same hotel as the rest of the team.
So he couldn't even be with the whole team,
That's right.
hang out with the team?
That's right. So what Branch Rickey did is he asked his staff to go out and find the top player in the Negro League, because that's the guy I want to bring in. And so they found Jackie Robinson. He interviewed him in early, actually 45. And when he talked to him, the thing that was famous was that he said, you know, I need somebody of character. I need somebody who's strong. And he said, he needed a Negro player with guts not to fight back, quote unquote.
Turn the other cheek.
Turn the other cheek. So, and Jackie was really a fighter.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was kind of hard to go down. But of course, he wanted to play ball because he was a terrific ball player. So, with that understanding, Rickey signed him to a contract, $5,000 a year, okay, in 1946.
I have to say about that $5,000. I remember Janelle brought up the fact that it was only $5,000.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, compared to today when they get millions and millions of
well,
dollars.
That was big time money. I mean, you know, gas was 25 cents a gallon. Okay,
See, I can't even imagine gas being 25
But I
cents.
think even later on, I think his salary was like $35,000 a year.
highest paid on the Dodgers.
Yeah, 35,000. But in today's dollars, that was like
Yeah.
300 and some thousand.
Right.
But it's still not like the $120 million contracts we're seeing today.
Yeah.
So,
But I'll tell you,
times
the
have
other
changed.
thing that I came across is, you know, not only did he play that 1 year with the Kansas City Monarchs, you know, the Negro League, but he went to the All-Star game, okay, and he batted .397, okay, so he's a terrific player.
What do you mean by I'm not too familiar with baseball? You know, I just know MMA stuff. So what is what does that mean?
.397 means .397 tenths of the time,
Okay.
he'll get a hit.
Oh,
That's
okay.
pretty good. I mean,
a batting
matter of fact,
average-
anything above 300
Right,
is
exactly.
considered very, very good.
just ask us even.
Okay.
Hey,
We're
this
baseball
year,
people.
Altuve.
I
voted-
just went I'm 25 and I went to my first baseball game this year.
And you had fun.
Yeah.
Well, Anyway,
That tells you
just
how
to
little I
kind
know.
of move it along a little bit. So he only played 1 year with the, actually it was the first year he went up to Montreal. It was a minor league team in the Dodgers. That's what Branch Rickey signed him to. So 1 year he played with Montreal. And then the next spring, spring of 1947, they brought him down for spring training in Florida with the Dodgers. And so this was the first time that a Negro player had played on a major league team. Okay, so that's when he broke it. Since 1880, this thing goes back. There never had been one. So that was a big, significant occurrence. He played first base because Eddie Stanky was the second baseman, and he was a big star. But normally he would play second base or shortstop. But so anyway, he played first base the first year. He had a great year. He was actually voted Rookie of the Year in 1947. Okay, and he excited everybody. I mean, he could steal bases. He could hit home runs. He had, he was just outstanding. As a matter of fact, that year he bought a .297, okay, according to the records.
Okay.
Had 175 hits, stole 29 bases, all right? So he was really something. But again, that year with the Dodgers, he was then voted the Rookie of the Year, okay, with the Dodgers.
In that
for the
first year that he signed, okay.
That's right, first year. Now, he had a lot of problems, too, there's taunting from the other players within his team. Some didn't want to even play with him.
His own teammates gave him a hard time.
Yeah.
And it's not a cohesive team if you have that, but he held his head up high and didn't fight back.
Well, he kind of I had a question, Roy, before we go too much into, the problems that he faced. You said, you saw Jackie Robinson. You were around around that time. Can you kind of describe as just an audience member?
Oh, well, he was just exciting, particularly because if he got on base, he was kind of like Trey Turner for the National. I mean, he was a speedster, and he stole bases. He'd steal second, and before they knew what happened, he was going to third. So it was very exciting to watch. It was the old black and white TV.
Yeah.
And, Ebbets Field is all the way down in Brooklyn. So I never actually got to Ebbets Field, but I saw him a lot on TV with my father. Okay, and that was the early days of television.
And what was kind of like, within, you can only speak about your community. Can I describe what was the vibe when it got announced that Jackie Robinson, first black person?
Exciting. It was so exciting because New York media. I mean, we had the three major teams in both leagues, the American and National. So he had plenty of coverage. And, and one or the other was going to be in a World Series, one of those teams. So, it was throughout the whole New York metropolitan area. But, even at those days, I was young, 10, 11, 12, growing up in school. The World Series would be broadcast on the radio in the classrooms of our school.
Really?
I went to parochial school in those days, and we had the nuns and everything. Yeah, it stopped everything, in the afternoon. The games would come on because they played them all in the afternoon.
See, schools today, they won't even let you bring your cell phone in. Y'all had a full-on radio.
That was the one exception, absolutely. And so it was very exciting when that came on, and you knew it was close by. In 48, they traded Stanky, so he finally got over to second base, from first base. But he had a great year, but the Dodgers ended up third in the league, so they didn't win the pennant or anything or go on to anything. But,
all right, so let's just transition back. So we see that you and the whole area was excited to see him, on the team and stuff, but not everyone was excited about it. Do y'all have any facts or stories that the things that he endured, problems on the team? We mentioned that his own team didn't even respect him.
Well, he got taunted. It's interesting because I read more about the taunting and the intolerance more from other baseball players. I didn't read a lot about how the crowds reacted to him. It would be interesting, do you have any, Mr. O'Connor?
Yeah, from what I read too, he brought out the African American audience unbelievably. They used to go root for their own teams in their own league. But when he got in there, they just flooded the ballpark. So they were setting it. They integrated the ball. They were setting records on attendance.
That's really good
with him. So that's what he was a big draw. They were all coming to see him play. So it was something else.
And the other thing that happened, he was the trailblazer. He was the one in the forefront. Once he opened those floodgates and got an African American player into the major leagues, I think several years after that, by that time, there were 150 other African American players accepted. But he had to be that person to break the color barrier, break the color line. And that takes a lot of courage. And, I believe, Mr. O'Connor, they had 10 years in baseball?
10 years, yeah. When he was brought up at the Dodgers, he was 28. And he played till he was 38, okay? Yeah,
And I know that the Dodgers finally won the World Series when he was part of it in 1955. Do you remember that? You want to talk about
Yes,
it?
that I remember even better because by then I just graduated from high school. Okay, I was following him, but it was the first time the Dodgers beat the Yankees in the World Series. It was almost like an annual event, the Yankees and the Dodgers. But he played third base then because they had brought up a young player called Junior Gilliam, who played second. But he played most of the season at third, and he wasn't as big a contributor, as in previous years, because he was starting to be affected by diabetes. And so it slowed him down a little bit, didn't steal as many bases, but he still was a major factor. And of course, that was pretty exciting. 7-game series, that they played. And I didn't realize it, but in kind of research, I found out he didn't even actually play the 7th game of that.
He did not?
No, did not, but he got his World Series ring, of course, and he played 6 games and was a major factor in that. But one other thing, I would just back up, because it's another exciting thing, which I remember very well back in school. 1951, there was a tie at the end of the season between the New York Giants and Brooklyn Dodgers for the league title. So they had a 3-game playoff. Like we have our division playoffs now, but they had like a wild card thing, 3-game playoff. So they each had won 1 game, and then they were playing the old Polo Grounds in New York. And I remember listening on the radio, Bobby Thompson hit the shot heard round the world, 2 outs in the 9th, last up bat, and he hits a home run to win for the Giants over the Dodgers, But that was that was 1951, And Jackie, of course, was a big player. He batted like .335 that year, and he stole a lot of bases, 105 runs. But again, there's a lot of highlights from him.
So it seems like he had a very accomplished career in baseball, not just for breaking the color barrier, but he actually did a good job as just a baseball player.
Yeah.
And then after that, they won that World Series in 1955, they reached the highlight.
Yeah.
And I think he retired the following year.
He retired in 56.
Yeah.
He actually retired, and he took a position with Chock full of Nuts Coffee Company, an executive position.
Yeah.
But the diabetes would really affect him quite a bit by then, so that was significant.
Well, yeah, let's talk. We touched upon his early life, military, and how he was in the baseball. Let's touch on a little bit of the time we have left. What did he do afterwards? Did he just disappear, or what did he do after he retired from baseball?
Well, actually, I didn't know this, but he was also the first black television analyst for Major League Baseball.
Really?
So that's, I think, a significant accomplishment. And he was very articulate. If you listen to him talk in interviews, I was watching him on the Dick Cavett show from 1972, and at that point he was not looking so good because of his diabetes, but very articulate man, a very passionate man, and you could see that. I think the civil rights and the passion he had for civil rights for African Americans was almost more important to him ultimately than his baseball. And as Roy mentioned, he was vice president of personnel at Chock full of Nuts. And I kind of remember that, the canned coffee.
That's right.
My grandmother used to drink that. So I didn't know that either. And that's a pretty, so he had the baseball career, fought the military injustice, had the baseball career, had all kinds of accolades. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1962 for baseball, which
on the first ballot.
On the first ballot, and that's like the pinnacle of an achievement.
First time eligible.
Yes. And then so he did the Chock full of Nuts, and then he also was an activist and was a friend of and a contemporary of Martin Luther King when Dr. King was younger. And he helped establish a bank called the Freedom Bank in Harlem, which was the first African-American owned financial institution. Because what you have to realize is back then, people wanted to go get a loan for a house, and you were African-American, you were denied.
Yeah.
So he said, we have to
go through some huge hassles.
Exactly. So he said, we need to have our own financial institution. So he was instrumental in that. And he did a lot of speeches. He had a column in a newspaper where he talked about, and his thing was, he was against people like Malcolm X, who advocated any means necessary. Jackie Robinson really was about civil rights through activism, through business, and nonviolence. So that was his legacy. he frequently would protest against the lack of minority managers in baseball. And in fact, in one of his last appearances, I believe it was in 1972, the year he died, he went out, he was honored with an award on the baseball field, and his comment was that he would be happy if he could see a black manager of baseball like before he died. And I don't know if he did or not. I'm not
I don't
sure if that
believe
ever
he did. I'm
happened.
not sure either. Yeah.
So he died from a heart attack in 1972.
At a fairly young age, too.
He was only 53 years old, and he was nearly blind also from complications from severe diabetes. And it's very sad when you watch videos of him.
Yeah. To be, only 53 is just way before his time,
Yeah, and then after his death, he was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So we have this person, short life. We don't know what he could have done had he lived longer. I'm sure he would have had more accomplishments. But what he did achieve in the time that he lived is just amazing. And I think all Americans should learn about him.
And also, his wife Rachel was quite a woman in her own right. I mean, she's done a lot in supporting him, of course, during those periods. Like, when he couldn't even sleep with the team, same hotel. Brent Trickey flew her down to the spring training thing. Let him. She was the only wife that was allowed to stay with the player because at least he had his wife with him.
Yeah.
So probably that was pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he was really. She was a major factor, I think, behind him and supporting him, particularly in that, turn your cheek the other way, because that was hard, and he had somebody to fall back on. And since after he died, she was also very active in a lot of things in this area.
And she was an educated woman also. I believe she worked at a college in nursing. So she was ahead of her time also. She fought racial barriers herself. He also had a tragedy, not just from the stress of what he endured on and off the baseball field. The stress really got to him. But he tragically lost his son when his son was only 24 years old, and he never got over that. His son was in a car accident and died at 24. So Jackie Robinson had a lot of amazing accomplishments, but he also had a lot of difficulties in his life, like many people do. But his character was always constant.
Yeah, and then also reflecting back at, I was just growing up during that period. He was really recognized as I was a kid and looking at it for his baseball accomplishments. You know what I mean? In other words, I didn't realize how much he was doing at, like Janelle's talking about, and because he was just so outstanding. There's absolutely no question about that. But then later, as time went on, we began to learn about that, so it's very interesting.
Well, I'm glad that we got to discuss a little bit more about Jackie Robinson than he's just a guy who did baseball. We saw that he was just a military person. He was a family man. He had a family. He accomplished a business, a bank. I can never understand financial stuff. So anyone who can do financial stuff is really amazing. And, when I read about people like him who, fought discrimination, I'm always amazed at the ones who never reacted violently. Because sometimes, at least for me, I can speak for myself. Sometimes when I see stuff or read stuff about it, I'm just like, I don't know if I could have behaved properly. I would have been like, we're gonna go in. Let's both, let's just go in.
A lot of his contemporaries said that. If you look at interviews, the fact that he was able to agree, he actually had. This is mind blowing to me. He had to sign a contract that agreed. In the contract that he would agree to turn the other cheek. Can you imagine that today? Can you imagine applying for a job today and part of your contract is that you have to agree that you will be taunted and made fun of and ridiculed and you will agree to turn the other cheek. That in and of itself shows you how times have changed.
That's shocking that he actually had to sign it, and it's shocking that even needed to be on a document to say, warning, you will be persecuted.
Yeah.
So
times have changed.
Let it go. But thank God, times have changed, and we have people from all races playing baseball. Maybe I'll start watching baseball a little bit more. I'll gain my information from Janelle. But thanks for coming on and talking about Jackie Robinson, and remembering the 17th anniversary of him breaking the color barrier. So thanks again for joining.
Thank you.
All right.